our process for being alive.
Wow, that's so beautiful. You're working on so many levels. It's sometimes really, you're like a meteor. And as a poet, you bring so much energy and inspiration to the communities where you work. Can we orient ourselves by learning about how you as a poet came to be involved in placemaking, how you came to be passionate about leading initiatives for shaping communities?
Definitely. What's interesting is with the idea of placemaking, I didn't know that's I didn't know that's what it was called. I didn't know that's what it was. It was kind of looking into an event or a space or a room of people or what's possible, right? So my favorite word is if. So many things can happen when you start with, oh, wouldn't it be cool if, it'd be really dope if and I have the type of personality where you just follow those threads of if until you can't follow them no more, in spite of people insisting that these ifs can't connect. So initially, if I go back to what would have been my entry into doing placemaking work, goodness gracious. I give myself permission to realize that's how I've always thought. I don't really know where to start, but I'll go with being able to start an open mic. And the open mic started 21 years ago. And it was one of the first things that I was co-owner of a bar. So it was one of the first things that we put on the calendar for the week. We're going to have a ladies' night and a this night, and we're going to have an open mic night, a poetry night. And as that open mic evolved, you had all the pieces that you would expect: poets, a mic, then we had a DJ, and it's getting features, and we have slams that are coming. But then it was also realizing that, there are poets that come to this event every week who love to scribble, who are really shy. And it's because the idea of stepping up against other larger voices, or people who are coming up with a new poem every week, or that have this explosive personality or performance, that doesn't make that poem less of a poem or less of a necessary story that should be public. So paying attention to the dynamics of this open mic created a hometown showcase. So for the people who were really focused on their writing, but weren't necessarily trying to go on tour, when we had people in town that were on tour, how about we have you read your whole 3 shiny poems to open up for this artist, and what that created in terms of recognizing the scale and the breadth of all of the art that was in the room. We had a night where we showcased the people who were never going to read. We created this slam bingo. So that's a way for the people who come every week and they listen. You can't have an open mic and there aren't people there who are listening. So how do we celebrate the listeners? So come up with an event that became an annual event, to celebrate the folks who are listening. And then you get a request from a teacher, which becomes, how do we do something for the kids who can? And what would be cool if. So, and at some point, all of those ifs, there are only so many hours in a day, there's so many days in the week. And then you are doing a bunch of stuff that's great and it's cool and it's exciting. And it's a bunch of stuff that in and of itself, these moments, these events, these initiatives, all are meaningful. The people who need them for reasons that are important. And they all should happen, and there are only so many hours and there are only so many days. And so then you kind of sit back, and I also have a background in marketing and PR. And you begin to appreciate the experiences that you've had, that you, again, going back to transferable skills, you go, this conversation I'm having with poets, I'm leaning into the conversations I've had with clients about message strategy. So this meeting I'm in about message strategy, I'm leaning into the classroom work I've done with third graders on how we're going to get everyone to appreciate that we all have different ideas. It doesn't make our ideas better or worse. We have to take the best parts of all our ideas and make one good idea to get it all comes together. So being able to respond to those invitations to do the core of that work. And then I turned out it had a name. It was creative placemaking. It had a thing. It was cultural organizing. It has a pedagogy even. It's, what is it now? Emergent strategy. And it's this understanding of what if can do, of the power of if. It leads you to consider all the voices. It gives you the chance to diversify how you present a possible answer. It reminds you don't really have an answer, that then that's not the goal anyway. The goal is getting humans together, turns out. So I found out that being intentional at every piece, at every moment, which is how, as a planner, as an organizer, as a wordsmith, what makes poetry work is obsessing over one word or another in a way that's even more focused than we are as fiction writers, as prose writers. So in this moment in conversation with you, just to celebrate that. That's just showing up in all the ways that I get to move, from my writing to how I work in community to what excites me about projects like the creative placemaking work, exciting projects like the Laureate projects, where there are all these ifs that get stitched together in a really, really dynamic way.
So there must be something about poetry, an intrinsic way in which you write and teach poetry that works naturally for you in terms of inspiring or inciting responses to imagining a better place, or imagining how each person could share and lean into building or co-creating a sense of place that is at the heart of creative placemaking, that generative, participatory kind of buy-in of everyone. I'd love to hear about some projects that you're up to. I know that you've been so busy. Shared a couple recent little movies with me and that I think would be fascinating to look at with others. Maybe we could start with your project that you're doing as a Rubinger Fellow. You described it as Neighborhood Creatives in Residence.
Yes. So to set this up, similar, mentioning I'm here at tables, I'm a poet, I'm a fiction writer, I'm a performer, and I'm in a conversation about the future of downtown. Okay. But I'm also a resident, and I'm also a strategic thinker, and I'm also all of these things. And as much as I celebrate all of the things about me that are wonderful and fabulous, I know other wonderful and fabulous creatives who also could, would, should be at these tables. And similar to where Stillwater, my nonprofit started in the heart was I'm being invited to come to these classrooms, and I know other adult poets who could certainly use this time, use this invitation. Let's just get them ready so that they don't show up and disappoint the teachers. So similarly, how can other creatives show up at this table? Because a real moment is we want to be at the table, but we can't come to the meetings at 2:00 in the afternoon necessarily. So some of those things that plague community engagement, where institutions and corporations are reaching out to the community as long as they can come downtown to their corporate offices, before 5:30 when community usually isn't available. And how do you make this initiative of value to everyone and not less convenient to community? So artists can often be a part of that. So having an opportunity for art is back up. What I was going to say about the real talk moment is, as an artist, as a creative, that this is my livelihood. I also would love to be able to be compensated for the time I'm taking out of my busy day And not just me, Dasha, but just any artist that we ask, any person that we ask, how do we change, how do we shift the way that we lean into community where it's not always so extractive? And artists and creatives can be a part of that role. Many times, not often, we can be invited to come and sing the songs, spit the poem, make the mural, make the pretty thing after all of the work has been done. And as an artist, yes. As a creative, me and other people who think and create, who lean into their creative thinking could have had a lot to offer during the working and the strategic planning and the initial outreach before we got to the ribbon cutting day. And in working with some creatives, if we're not, one of you don't have I have a marketing background, so I come in, I lean in, I have that at the table also. But so how do we prepare other creatives to be able to sit at that table who are interested in doing this kind of work, who are interested in being a part of the conversations before the grand opening and the unveiling and the celebration, which is a call really for artists. In this project, we invited practitioners from across the country to come in, and we did a symposium called Creative Exponential. And the invitation was, as creatives, you can exponentially increase invoices and the work that you're doing. And that's not a call for all artists. You know, I've spoken with some visual artists. They said, I just want to do my art. I don't want to cure the world. I don't necessarily want to have to tax my process just to be able to make my art, which I appreciate and I understand. So we have practitioners come in who are doing placemaking projects, who are organizers in a traditional sense. We had a neighborhood leader come in from Baltimore, for example, who asked the question, so why should I be excited, me and my neighbors, why should we be excited that you and your university and your art institution are here with your little project? Why should we be excited because you're excited? And that it often can be the experiences that neighborhoods have because the university has a research project, because some artist has a great sculpture idea, because someone outside of the folks who live here had a great idea on behalf of the people who live here, with all the best of intentions, with what can be an incredible idea. And there's a way to invite yourself and your great idea into someone else's neighborhood, into someone else's institution, into someone else's nonprofit mission. And we all know that institutions and agencies don't always do it well, not for being malicious, just there are such things as best practices for a reason. So how to give these creatives these best practices, how to invite this conversation, and how to introduce this as a whole new an open line of work, not new, but the same way I'd realized that I've been doing it all along. And then you start to activate and inter-project ideas with a different, a different strategy, possible strategy. So 12 people or 11 people submit ideas after having this symposium of a community engagements tied with organizing, tied with justice work, tied with creative solutions, from residencies and fellowships and placemaking projects. They were each given a coach, they were each given funding, they were each given resources, physical contact and otherwise, to activate this one idea around reentry, fatherhood, early child development, water, food deserts, generations, and I'm forgetting another one. And so at the end of this, we had these institutional partners that were able to give content information, be supportive. They attended these showcase presentations that all the creatives did at the end of their events. And all of the institutions this was incredible what they came up with. And we have no idea how to replicate this. How do we even tell this to our board? So how to translate something that in an institutional way, there's a willingness and an understanding of the impact, but how to make it a thing that a corporation can say, this is what it is, what it does, what it costs, how it works. So this year is a Rubinger Fellow. I'm one of 10 social entrepreneurs who've being supported and thinking through an initiative. And so I've been in conversation with corporate folk and institutions and nonprofits on how to build a program where a company can say, this is how I participate to make that happen again. So this is a summary since we did the creative side, this is what we figured out for the creatives, and we're gonna work really hard to make this happen again.
So great.
Particularly in Milwaukee, I think our neighborhoods are totally hungry for creative things to happen. It means they care about their community and they care about cool and fun and interesting and cultural things happening.
So as an artist is one way to be a creative. Obviously, you make a dance, you write a book, you compose a song. And we also know that creatives are chefs and graphic designers and architects, and that mom who figured out how to get the baby to be quiet, and the dad who, and turns out all of us are creatives. So moving that into how do we then change the conversation about what creatives bring to a discussion, bring to a city, and then inviting them to think of a project. Think of a project that's relevant to a specific conversation, and expanded it to what are all of the things that all of us are impacted by. So it was water, fatherhood, food access, the impact of stories, the impact of our generations, and how to interact with young children with brain building. So people submitted their ideas on one thing they would do to launch this one conversation in a neighborhood.
I hope that this summer I'm able to spend some time on porches, talking to people about life lessons that they've learned.
I think that we can harness this force of turbulence in talking with students to think about, how do we interrupt the flow of what we see going on around us when that's something that we want to change.
Mine is like seeing the place, the poetry is kind of like hearing the place, and the dance is like feeling the place.
Got it, okay.
I was really mindful about how to build this thing. Being able to give people the space, the resources, the coaching and encouragement, and the time to imagine a project that they would want, that addresses a topic that they're interested in, that puts some money in their pocket for the skill set that they bring to a market was incredible.
But what I remember most was about Lappin Project was very different than it is now. It's like family.
Artists can be magical people with lots of ideas, but they also need support. And I think it does really take a team of people to really help ideas get from in your brain or on paper to reality. I'm on board.
Yeah.
Part of how I approached the coaching was to really approach it like I was mentoring someone who wanted to do partnerships. And we knew that the creatives had a range of experience working with different neighborhoods.
It's you, Washington Park. You're the people of People's Park.
And I always thought Milwaukee was beautiful in its way, but I was able to see how beautiful it really was neighborhood by neighborhood. Everyone was so unique, but they all had a story to share, and it almost was as though they were waiting for the platform to be able to share it.
I think what I'm most looking forward to was inspired by the wrap-up event, where we talked about the impact on the neighborhoods through the perspective of the participants. So the creatives themselves brought different summaries to that event of how their work engaged the neighborhood and the impact that it began to have. I can't wait to see more of that.
So ultimately, I would love for people to just pause and reconsider the role that creativity plays. Like for people to pause and consider that creative person or that outright artist that's in their network and ask them their opinion about things. So these are people who happen to make things, and they vote, and we have families, and we have preferences, and we have some solutions. Having all of those perspectives at a table, or like for people to consider how broad their resources are. I want people to look at folks that you already know, and then tilt your head the other way and imagine how else they are amazing. So this is reframing a lot of things, reframing neighborhoods, reframing a work path, reframing the role of creativity, and it's reframing relationships. If nothing else, I hope that people will consider those elements of this project. And then of course,
just consider this a project. It should be something that goes on forever.
That's fantastic. So your Rubinger Fellowship enabled you to do the project, to document it this way, to build this documentation? Oh, you're muted. There you go. Dasha, are you muted? I think you might be. Sorry. Okay,
Yes, thank you.
Dear. Okay.
Pesky little button. Yes. So this part of the partnership was done in partnership with the Greater Milwaukee Foundation. So I was able to secure funding to launch this initiative because a focus was for the creatives. Again, and figuring out how do we, if you know it's possible and you're giving resources on how to do it, then the whole idea of teaching people how to fish and not just giving fish. But then now it's a matter of creating a market, or I'm giving an opportunity to help create a market. So these folks with these skills that they've already had, but framed in a way where they have a different way how to market them. So this year is working on building the institutional side. So loosely, it would be a company agrees that they want to have this kind of authentic outreach with the community. So the company then would become a partner. There'd be a company that would partner with one of these teams. And now together you have a creative, you have a corporate or a nonprofit partner, you have a neighborhood partner, and together these three are working together to come up with these ideas, this event, this initiative, led by a creative who now has gone through this training. So I'm excited about this, creating a cycle. And it's an all, I envision this as this aspirational fellowship of creatives. So every year there'd be a new crew, this coalition of creatives and neighborhoods and companies, and this crew would have, I'm at the part of how we decide what their topics are. Ideally, those would be sourced from conversations with the neighborhoods. So I'll working towards how to design the mechanisms. So we can say, here y'all, here's how we do it again. If I close my eyes and I disappear, and I don't plan on disappearing, but one of the goals with the fellowship was to make it into a guide. So in partnership, other communities, other municipalities, other neighborhoods, other cities could do a similar, if not the same project. So all of those pieces have to be thought through. Here's how to make this happen next. So it's really interesting to be at this part of work as a creative change agent. I imagine this would be where the mom and pop shop starts to think about franchising, where it's how to think to scale, and moving away from, and it's been a year of transition. We've talked about this before, but it's more than just a conversation of quitting smoking, and not that I smoke, it's more than a conversation of changing a thing that's so huge. So it's not for my hands to do. So thinking in scale, and being able to work in scale, being able to actually imagine in scale, it's more than just plans. Turns out there's an emotional level. There's you're able to expand and expect and imagine and think more. For someone whose favorite word is if, it's interesting and it's telling, and it's a reminder of how much real life can constrict your ability to dream big, to live big. So we all have our...
And you don't let that stop you. I mean, I'm thinking about you actually came up in a mom and pop kind of a family business situation, didn't you? I mean, tell us a little bit about that and what you learned from like your mother and your grandmother, because I know that's an amazing story.
Absolutely. My mother is the president of Malone's Fine Sausage, Glorious Malone's Fine Sausage. And Glorious Malone was my grandmother. And my grandparents had a small corner store in the 50s and 60s. And part of the corner store was penny candy and milk. And they had a little meat slicers, so you could also get some rag bologna and different versions of cheeses. And they had a recipe for hoghead cheese, which is a Southern and German delicacy. And it's the leftover parts of the hoghead meat with spices ground up, and it's a loaf. So oftentimes people can see in the deli section and many recipes use a gelatin. So there often can be a less than favorable description of the product, but our family recipe has no gelatin. It's all natural, all meats and spices. And people would come by, hey, after my grandfather passed away, Miss Malone, I got my people coming in from Alabama, Miss Malone, I got my folks coming up from Arkansas, Kenya, can I buy a, and that become one of the products that they sold out of the store. And then we got a visit from, as the story goes, 2 men in a suit from the federal government. And Miss Malone are you Miss Malone? Yes, I am. She's a Spitfire at 5'1". And Miss Malone, is this your product? Well, yes, it is. Well, you can't sell meat across state lines. People were coming up from Chicago to buy her meat and had it handed out on the taverns. And some were reselling it at their stores. So she went through the process and became the first African-American woman certified by the USDA to be able to sell meat and to have a meat plant. And so she operated that through the 80s and through the 90s. She passed away, and my mother took over the business, her oldest daughter, and has been running it now since. And Malone's Fine Sausage, Hoghead, we now have pate, we have our own rag bologna. Watching my mother advance the company. So what my grandmother put into place, we're selling this product in corner stores and grocery stores throughout Wisconsin, tri-state area, some Midwest. My mother came and expanded it, and now adding online. We're in, I believe there's a Malone's customer in all but 3 states. She's very, very much has her eye on Alaska. And it's just been remarkable to be the child watching this growth. And there's absolutely, without thinking about it, there's an ethic of getting it done. There's an ethic of, yes, you're going to be tired. There's an ethic of, and also what can you give? Also, what can you give? So like any person, the messages that are in your bones from being around women from being around cousins from being in a family that, and then it shows up and you don't think about it. I have a girlfriend and he's like, why haven't we had more conversations about your family? Because it's my family. Mm-hmm. It's, and not as in terms of a secretive way, but it's who and how they always are. It was more of my grandmother and my cousins and aunties than it was this business and these products. Even though that's a huge part of our family, it's part of our conversations at the holidays, because it's part of our, it's particularly my mother's all the time work, and we are all involved in some tangential way, if for no other reason, it's our family. So it just changes the conversation.
So it's like this entrepreneurial thing, this Black woman business-led, expansion over generations. And then there's this whole part that I'm thinking about in sort of the metaphorical level, which is the way the sausage literally gets made. It's the spices and the ingredients. It's like it is flavors and its color and its texture. And that's a kind of view that you bring in terms of like a special kind of recipe as a chef. You use the metaphor of a chef often when you're talking about creativity. Mm-hmm. And it really translates beautifully into how you engage so many different people in a community. I would love to talk about another project, 414 Day in Milwaukee, or Milwaukee Day, and what that experience was about of helping a city shape its vision forward.
It was, I love this video, and I love how it all came together. I had a period, stop there. And particularly that this project came about because of relationships, right? So initially, it was an invitation between Imagine MKE and Downtown Milwaukee. So Imagine MKE is an advocacy group that has formed after years of conversations and coalition building and meetings and symposiums and conferences, fundraising, all the possible meetings to you have this outfit that is focused on, one, the health of the creative sector of our city, the impact of the creative community in our city, and also all of the policy and legislature and money raising, just shifting how the city works around creativity. And so that's the obvious outreach when working with the arts groups. That's also being quietly at the table in discussions around safety for women artists in the city. And also the Downtown Association, which can do all the things that an association would do in terms of a business district, and the downtown business district, that. But we had a chance to work on a project this summer when we thought the Democratic National Convention was coming to the city. There was, and even though it came in a different form, I was impressed that the downtown bid went forward with this installation project with myself and Della Wells, who is a collage artist and whose work is so visceral and powerful. She actually has pieces that are also in the Smithsonian, where she's telling the story in her voices about the narrative of Black women, the impact of Black women. And again, her collage style it's gripping. So they were looking at some of the work that she already has created and asked, we wanted to commission me to create some pieces that together tell the story of democracy. And initially it was a piece about the road to democracy. And in the invitation, we realized afterwards it was a typo, because it was the road of democracy was the invitation. We get in the meeting, the road said, no, don't change it. That actually is what gets me spinning, my mind spinning about what to write, because the road of democracy says what's true, that we don't know where we're going and we don't all agree on how to get there. And so wrote stanzas. So then it was a Sudoku way of writing this poem that makes that statement in stanzas that were short enough that would fit on a light pole banner that would be paired with Della's work. So in 10 blocks throughout downtown, there were a lot of banners that stretched these 10 blocks in our downtown region that talked about this is what the conversation we need to have, that democracy actually is. Much to be proud of, much to celebrate, and still so much work to do with these vivid, these vibrant images next to them. So that installation is still up. It was up through the end of the year. And to work with the downtown bid again, the ask was, we need a video. 414 Day is coming. The Milwaukee area code is 414. So April 14th is 414 Day, Milwaukee Day. And these two institutions that have done these projects that have been really thoughtful in the past wanted me to be thoughtful again on a piece that doesn't just celebrate the day. Everyone knows that I have not a love-hate relationship with my city, but I expect so much. So I'm that teacher, that favorite aunt that's going to remind the city to stand up straight, that's going to tell the city to stop scuffling its shoes, to tell the city to take ownership for that. That's me. And it's taken a minute for me to realize that it's more love in there than frustration, but frustration just the same. So I appreciate that they honor that, my relationship with the city, that we can talk about. And even with that, here's what we went through together. And even in that, here's what we know about what we are capable of. And especially because of that, we know that we have what it takes to get through whatever's coming. If we can admit that we don't know what's coming, but admit that we have what it takes to meet it. So that's what this poem is, a new day, a 414 day. Share before I just started without you.
Awakens the skin. Anticipation awakens the skin. Vibrates the air with promise, like a distant song arching its encore above the trees, above rooftop patios, into our playgrounds, alleyways, and cafes. where summer festivals, hugs, and handshakes planted into memories like mustard seeds. While our timeline sprouted memorials, movements, viral dance videos, and pandemic disease. We will emerge from under this shroud, each of us carrying forward a small corner, a thread of life stretched less tightly across our muscles and frame. Where we're going isn't where we've been. Unease, foreign and familiar, all over again. And again, we bake maybe into mission. Stir elevation with intuition. Lean into the hiss of electrical currents coursing inside our layered possibility. Wonderment prickles our excitement. Like the radiant sunrise pouring its colors across the sky, splattering light against drugstore windows and buses, into our kitchens and morning cups of tea, we shine in natural light, in distilled mantras and memory, in fervent imagination and shared history. 414. We have never been here all over again before, creating new days all over again. We are 414. Our new day is coming.
I love how you pick up that beautiful, invitation to ask yourself like what you can do for your country, what you can do for your city. And that's how you convey democracy. And that's how you, showcase all of these creatives in your community.
Congratulations. It gets to be art. That gets to be the art as well, of bringing folks in. And where sometimes you're the material and sometimes you get to make space for them for another conversation. So thank you.
You've been so good at that. You have been so good at sharing the stage, of bringing other people up onto the stage and finding ways through, community engagement and video documentation, all of these other, creatives in this process. You really shared that light. So what do you want to do next? I mean, what's your in this year as you kind of carry the responsibility of the fellowship and the position of being concurrent poet laureate of Milwaukee and the state of Wisconsin.
That's all.
Is there a lot of room for Dasha?
There is actually, and what's interesting is, and that's been part of this calibration. One of the things that I didn't seek, none of us set out to learn, but we learned a bunch of lessons. But one of the things that shifted in sitting out in that backyard last summer was recalibrating enoughness, and having all of this convergence of projects and work and the laureateships and the fellowships. None of these are new conversations. None of these are new initiatives. These aren't new passions. So to be able to settle into 4 solid projects that I'm really passionate about, that have plenty of moving pieces, and in between which I don't have to worry about basic needs, which many of our creatives and artists and small nonprofits and small art groups do have to process. So yes, I'll be able to focus on these things because it's focusing on these projects, these initiatives. And in addition to that, also making flyers. And in addition to that, also, and not that it's less work, but at least it's grouped in a different way. And that's been my, the working towards that work experience, that life work experience, and it's here. So I'm excited about that. So I am really into this. The state laureateship project is a poetry exchange, and it's essentially, so it's a conversation about incarceration ultimately, but it's a poetry exchange between traditional writers and then writers who are incarcerated. And it's the element of making those poets, those poems in exchange. Someone has to print them, someone has to fold them, someone has to mail them, and those are positions that we're in partnership to make jobs available. So to contract someone who's formerly incarcerated as project manager, we're contracting a team of IT developers who also happen to be just as impacted. We're working with the DOC to offer, again, guides and training. So internally, the writers inside have workshops and resources to participate. So building this coalition, so it's a smooth machine of getting people to write poems and share poems with one another, which of course invites a broader discussion. There'll be publications, there'll be chapbooks, there'll be workshops, there are a lot of things that will happen just in putting this machine in motion. So I'm really excited about the conversations that I've been in, the meetings I've had, the willingness, the excitement from workforce development to print shops to writers who are willing to do writing workshops, to people who are formerly incarcerated who have gotten out that now we're able to actually do work, continue doing work together, to the people who are incarcerated who are finding ways to get me messages anyway on how they're going to participate. I'm giddy with excitement of how this is unfolding. For creative work, I'm giving my space like little scavenger hunts on how to be surprised with writing. So I have these journals of lectures I've sat in on and curious documentaries that have tickled my brain, and just going back through those and there'll be something that interests me that I'll find some things and study a bit, and they'll turn into poems. Some of them do. And I have a production that I'll be touring that's a conversation about race in class called Makin Cake. So that's been something that's been in motion. And just this year, all of the pins are being put in the map to be able to travel with that. So this year in creating, it's scribbling poems. It's my weekly little vignettes that are my 100-word stories. And I have a manuscript that I'll spend this summer in the backyard, finally getting to final draft. Not final draft, that is not accurate. Completed draft, not at all close to final, but so I'll be able to write this.
Completing the manuscript. So it seems for you like it's not a situation of being a poet who's having this sort of episode of like social engagement and finding work to deepen racial justice, to lift up voices of folks who are incarcerated, to engage with them at a human level. It's like you're a mission-driven social sculptor. I mean, it's all one, it seems, for you. It's I mean, some poets would step into it hesitantly, but not at all. But it is this convergence of that skill and passion with this vision that seems to really be you. You're just, it's happening now. And how does that? We don't have a lot more time, but I'm just curious, how does Alaska fit into that? Because you've got family here and there, and how do you hold all that too?
It works because this journey has been a journey of moments in the first place, right? So like I mentioned, I've come this far from not knowing that this is where I was going. So the trust in the moments that didn't make sense, but I was so clear about why I'm in this project, or why I've been invited to be in that physical place, or why I'm on this campaign. Those projects get me into conversations, introduce me to people like my whole life partner, because it makes sense in that moment. So all that being said, it's also not really knowing what the next 6 months might look like, let alone the next year, let alone the next 2, 3, 4, 5. What's the grant cycle looking like? Then we'll know. So for me, it knowing that it's playing it by ear a bit. So this year we know I'm back and forth. I've been in Anchorage for almost 6 months now. So I came in September for about a month, and then I came in December, and I'm heading back to Milwaukee at the end of May. So I've told people I was snowbirding backwards, right? So, it'll be probably 2-month chunks or so at a time, largely because I'll be back for festivals and there's family time here. And then it'll be the end of the year, and already I'll have a tour schedule to contend with. So it'll be depending on the month and the date, which home I'll be at. So this will be for me anyway, the rhythm for the next couple of years. My tenure as state poet laureate is until next fall. And then after that, we'll see where the alignment project is. I would love for that to be work that I'm still doing beyond the laureateship. Who knows where this tour will go? Maybe Makin Cake will be a show, and I'm doing poems into 2022 with this show. I'm not sure. I'm not sure.
I suppose it's got to help that you and your husband are both artists. You're both creative.
Oh my goodness.
Hamilton is an incredibly dynamic and creative person who shares a lot of passions in terms of community engagement, lifting people up, social justice work, transition from incarceration, all the kinds of amazing people that he's, that's
all the things. It has been certainly as our relationship, this is for us a second marriage for both of us. And just in the lifetimes of relationships we both had, we were pinning this one as the last and the reward for all the ones that were in place before. And if for a lot of reasons, but it's especially been such a relief to have another creator as a partner. So a creator who's also a public figure, who also is inclined to lean into projects that are going to be towards justice. And any one of those three things can be a stressor in a relationship, but you add all of those three things, and it just takes a really special pairing. So to have someone we can appreciate one another's day cycle. So I don't trip about the long nights, and he doesn't trip about the 1,000 people phone numbers, and we both understand what it takes to get a project to completion. And we all know we're both sensitive about our art. So it's helpful. We both have had partners where that wasn't the case, and you have to have a different edge of protection around your craft, about your why. So yes, and then on top of that, the work that we're interested in, we have a show that we've created together. We do implicit bias training together. We had a chance to do one recently that was broadcast on the Milwaukee PBS. So yes, it's a great journey, and we know that there's a lot more to come.
Well, you should know how to say yes to life, to yes to collaboration, yes to experimentation, yes to journeying, and to also just really seizing the moment and being present in it. I wonder if you would send us out with a poem, and it could be something that you crack a book on. You've got something amazing. You have an amazing website and a beautiful poem right front and center there. If you want to bring us to that. But I think, in light of an incredibly traumatizing year on so many levels, a year that has just, really pushed us to find really, deep-seated resilience and strength to find it if we didn't have it. I want to say that you inspire me so deeply with your capacity to find joy and to elevate joy and to lift up, the beauty of the moment. And this moment that we're in right now, it's really special to me that you've taken this time. I want to thank you for that.
Oh, absolutely. I always enjoy being in conversation with you, because we get to be in conversation and explore and have some things we're really clear about and still have a lot of fuzzy edges. And I would say that's been something that's been a great gift as a creator, as a parent, as a partner in the work that we're trying to do, to have a lot of the core of a really lot of great sentiment, but still allowed to have some fuzzy edges where before we felt we had to show up and everything polished and figured and solved. And we're remembering that we were never supposed to have it that way. So I'd like to go out with a piece that's is fairly new, and it's kind of the space that we're in. And that I've been in, of ready but not ready, and strong but still kind of, tender, and knowing that I am personally and professionally in a transition that I can't necessarily name, and to be okay with that. Sometimes those moments can feel like, what is wrong with me and what is wrong with us? And not just, and maybe I just haven't figured that part out yet, but to be in that space of transition, and in individual ways I am, in a global way we are. And so this is a shorter and kind of it may not be a common Dasha piece, but it's definitely speaking to the moment we're in. Liminal.
Great. Wow.
Waking, dreaming, tasting, sated. Dawn, day, narrowly between approximation and certainty. Following, leading, circling, cycling, between I'm sorry, WYD. Between relinquish and resentment. Gasp, grasping, adjusting, settled, settling. Wanting, anticipating, figuring, knowing. Between flash and passion, deciding, doing. Having a taste, buyer's remorse. Bliss, shame, release. Familiarity, comfort, turned and spun. Conditional, committed, between active and activated. Data and denial. 1 millibreath between implicit and exercise. Between sundown and end of day.
Thank you so much, Dasha.
Thank you.
I'm blowing you a kiss. I'm sending you a great big hug. And I want to thank you for just all the love that you show for, for connecting, and for the community that has stretched between us, that you've fostered over many years. Thank you. Look forward to talking to you again. Keep up the good work.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciated this space. Absolutely. Anytime.